You're now watching the political segment of the weekend show. The topic of discussion is the suspension of the acting chairman of EFCC, Ibrahim Magu. The acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, was suspended by President Muhammadu Buhari for allegedly committing financial crimes. Let's pause. Magu appeared before a panel led by retired President of the Appeal Court, Ayo Salami. Magu's travails followed a memo by Abubakar Malami, the Attorney General of the Federation, who has leveled serious allegations against him. Joining us on today's program to discuss this, we have
Liborous oshoma. He is a legal practitioner and a contributor who you may have seen before on the show called The Advocate. Welcome to the weekend show, sir.
My pleasure, sir.
Also joining us again is Obono. He's a human rights activist and a legal practitioner. Welcome back to the weekend show.
Thanks for having me again.
Let's start with you, Liborous. It's alarming that this sort of situation can unfold in a country like ours. I mean, I think it was a BBC headline that BBC Pidgin, Nigeria's anti-corruption chief was arrested for corruption. I mean, it's almost humorous. It's like a bad joke, you know. So what do we really need to do as a people to fix this system? I watched a video of yours where you were talking about the inability of the man who is wielding the knife and holding the yam to resist cutting a piece of that yam for himself.
Exactly.
So how do we fix the system?
You see, if you like, bring, like Obasanjo had said, if you like, bring Jesus Christ to head the anti-corruption agency in Nigeria. The way it is structured, you know, there's bound to be abuse. And so we have institutions that are structured in a way that creates superhumans instead of, you know, actually enhancing the institution. And the way EFCC is structured with the style of the government, not just the EFCC, even the ICPC, and the style of this government, there is no way a cent will not falter, you know, in such organization. I give you a few examples. First and foremost, you look at the organization, the EFCC, they prosecute, they investigate, they will recommend prosecution, they will prosecute, and then recover assets and manage the assets. When you have such, you know, powers conferred in one person, one organization, you're definitely going to have abuse. That's why I made reference to, you know, he who holds the yam and the knife would definitely cut a few slices for himself. And because also the way Nigeria is structured, you have friends and families who, the moment you are appointed as a government official, there'll be celebrations in churches and mosques, Thanksgiving everywhere. They are thanking God because they feel, oh, these are our turn now. People will take paid adverts to celebrate you, not because you are going there to work, because they feel, look, it's our turn to chop. And that's why during campaign, Atiku said, I would, you know, give contracts to my friends. I would, you know, unbundle an NPC. And people criticize them. And then secondly, this government also is known to violate court orders with impunity. And in a society where court orders are not obeyed, there is no way you can have an organized system, because what happens is you have, you know, you have agencies where the boss feels above the law. Take ICPC, for example. Remember the case of Pinnacle is still very fresh in our memory. Even while the matter was in court, ICPC still went ahead, you know, to attempt to make arrest. And in some cases, they will have one matter before Justice Kolawole, and then go before Justice Binta Ayako on the same set of facts. Meanwhile, the accused is in custody, and they will say, look, we can't find the person, because there are no consequences for action, because the government is known to violate court orders. And then thirdly, which is the last point, so that I yield the floor for my colleague, you have EFCC staffs. You train them. You take them to FBI in America. You take them to India to train. And then you bring them back. The same Nigerian police that you said have been so compromised, you deploy the Nigerian police to head those sections where you have trained people to manage. And then, how do you enhance professionalism? So it's like training a man and then leave him redundant. You bring somebody who's incompetent. I'm not saying police are incompetent, but they have their own problems. So they should manage their own problem and then leave those that you have trained to handle those sections. Otherwise, you're consistently going to have this abuse. And if you look at the EFCC Act, Section 2, subparagraph A, sub 2, did not say that it's only the police that will consistently man FCC. But I do not know why we keep going back to recycle the police as heads of EFCC. So for me, that's why you will always have this problem.
You know what? This comes to my next question, which is about leadership. The 8th Assembly refused to confirm Magu as chairman. The DSS wrote a report, I think in 2016, saying this shouldn't be the person for the job. Now, the current president rode on the wings of fighting against corruption. And so that was meant to be a major pillar of his government. And so we've seen a lot of trials and media trials, but we've also seen a lot of cases fail because the EFCC has refused to show up in court or prosecution had bungled something. But coming back to the point of leadership and the selection of leadership, are we truly, and Matt, this is to you, are we truly fighting corruption, or is this a battle between the Attorney General, who feels his office has not been respected by the office of the EFCC acting chairman? Or so is this a battle between two elephants, or is this actually a fight against corruption, coming years after we have been told that there's a problem?
My sincere opinion is that it's a power tussle among, because there's vacuum in leadership. And the vacuum in leadership is the vacuum from the presidency himself. Because if you have a government, it behoves on you to be able to command leadership amongst your appointees, both from the ministers to, you see, it's only in these governments that you get to see one agent or minister fighting against the other. I mean, executive now, not talking about legislative and executive infractions and all that, but where you have people in the cabinet calling out each other for one thing or the other, and the presidency is mum about it. Now, in terms of EFCC, I keep asking one question. Why is it that it's only the Attorney General of the Federation that always cries about insubordination? You hear the case of Obono. One of the charges against him, or the complaints against him, was insubordination. Now we have Magu's case. One of the major issues is also insubordination. And so you begin to wonder and ask yourself, in the terms of leadership, what is this man doing right or wrong that is making everybody bypass him straight to the president? You know, which now brings about the issue of insubordination. Because a leader who is working right and doing what is right and moving with his team or the agencies or the people are under him would definitely not have the question of insubordination hanging around him as one of the problems, one of the issues he's using to hunt or get his people out of office. So leadership is very key. And that leadership starts with the president down to the appointees. So there is a leadership vacuum at the top, and there is also leadership vacuum in the fight against corruption within the anti-corruption agencies. So you see this accusing that person, the other person accusing this, and there is no general inter-agency cooperation that helps or that should coordinate the fight against corruption. So everybody is doing what they feel like doing, and nobody is really in charge of it. And the Attorney General is actually the one who is supposed to be able to coordinate all these agencies because they fall under his ministry. And so when he's unable to do that, that's where you find this kind of issues raising their ugly heads. And we now begin to scamper for who is the most powerful person and who is not. So it boils down to the fact that there is absence of leadership in the fight against corruption.
And the fight against corruption is one of the three cardinal, points that President Muhammadu Buhari ran with when he was campaigning to come into office. But as I said earlier, it seems like Nigerians were in a really bad comedy. We're acting out a really bad comic movie because we look at the systems from the judicial arm of government to the legislative to the executive, and we're all suffering from systems that do not work. So the lack of interagency collaboration, the lack of checks and balances in systems. So how do we go about fixing this? Because we can talk about the problems all we want, but if we're not able to prefer solutions and implement them, then we're going to keep on going in a merry-go-round. You know, sometimes when you study history and you read these books and you realize that the problems we're facing as a people in 1960 are the same problems we're facing today. It's madness. So how do we break this cycle of madness and start to prefer solutions that can fix the structural problems that we are facing as a country?
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to also disagree briefly that the leadership and reportage problem does not start with the Attorney General. It starts with the presidency. Because if you have a situation where your agencies bypass, the ministers they are supposed to be reporting to, and then come to you directly, and you do not railroad them back to that channel of reportage, they are definitely going to abuse it. And then also, you look at, I would not also fail to call out the National Assembly here. The purpose of the legislature is to consistently look at laws and find a way of strengthening them. What stopped the National Assembly? Do I need to call the National Assembly to look at the Efcc Act, the ICPC Act, and say, how do we strengthen this agency? So that we don't have this situation that we consistently have. The National Assembly needs to look at the laws creating the agencies and say, look, ICPC and EFCC, for example, I really do not see why you should have those two agencies. Instead, merge them and then unbundle the agencies and say, okay, look, instead of having ICPC pursue corruption in public sector, let's have one anti-corruption agency, but you unbundle them, then let's have, you will be the investigator headed by a seasoned investigator, then you be the reviewing authority like they do, abroad. Because even when the FBI goes for a raid or sting operation, they have cameras, body cameras on their uniform. Do you know that there's another agency that will review those cameras, those videos, to actually ensure that they complied with the provisions of the law in obtaining evidence, because you have your mind against prosecution. Because when you get to court, if the judge would definitely also look at the way evidence were obtained in prosecuting your matter. But here, nobody cares. I thank God now Magu is complaining, asking for bail. And I also will urge the Nigerian police to grant him bail if they are not ready to prosecute him now. It is right. But he should learn a lesson. EFCC also should learn a lesson, because this is the approach. They take you in. ICPC will do the same thing. They will invite you to their office. They leave you in the office, and then they are in court. They will inform the court that they can't find you. And so it is happening. What we need to do to strengthen these institutions, to build lasting institutions, and not just the building like Magu referred to when he was asked about building, lasting institutions. What we need to do is to strengthen the laws and not wait for an Attorney General to write letters before the president would act. The president also should have his hands on the provisions of the law. What is the provisions of the law as regards appointment of a chairman? But
a president that flouts the laws, that disobeys court orders. So
and then that now brings us back to our electoral system. You need to strengthen your electoral laws to ensure that, once a president or a minister flouts the provisions of the law or a court order, then something needs to be done. I can still remember the days of Allah Akabasharon, where lawyers would boycott courts for executive recklessness. But today, we'll be debating. You see some lawyers on this side and others on the other side debating whether the man is actually fighting corruption or not, as if there are no processes and procedures for fighting corruption. You don't fight corruption according to the dictate of the man who is at the helm of affairs. You fight corruption by ensuring that rules are laid down. And what are those rules? The National Assembly should clearly spell out. The man who should manage the recovered asset should be different from the man who is recovering the asset. Because a situation where you manage asset recovered, I just give you an instance. You give me 400 fantastic building in Abuja recovered to manage. The tendency is that I am the man who is prosecuting. I am the one who will investigate. My friends will first come, look, I'm interested in that property. And when there is no supervision from anywhere, I will close my eyes to certain things. And then secondly, I can also come to you. Osasu is too beautiful and she's making so much money. Just look for something in her account. And then the FCC or ICPC will invite you. In some cases, even matters that have nothing to do with the FCC or ICPC, you are invited. And then the first step is lock her up. So that you broke you psychologically, and then you have no power to negotiate. Bring 40% of your wealth, and the moment corruption charges are levied against you in Nigeria, nobody wants to hear your defense.
I want to come back to...
So that's why our National Assembly should be up and doing. You don't need to look at the president's body language to amend the laws.
Okay, so I want to come back to fighting corruption. There's also the human angle and the people problem. So we've spoken about leadership from the executive to the legislative. Just yesterday, and as of this morning, it was reported that the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, the office where they came and submitted the report during this probe, was broken into, and computers damaged, and documents were lost. Now, besides the CBN and the Department of State Security, the EFCC and the NFIU should be one of the most secure places in Nigeria. We've also read in reports that they are the Magu boys, a certain group of people who work within the EFCC and go around doing whatever they want to do, which is sanctioned by the chairman. And so even if he is suspended or removed, you still have people. What about the people who are breaking into these places and damaging computers? What about the EFCC top staff who are going out for these raids? We heard the former head of state, Abubakar Abdulsalami, they came to his house. We heard that T.Y. Danjuma, amongst other people. So we have a systematic problem within these agencies. And these are people like you and I here who are not government appointees. So how do we deal with that issue? Because Nigerians also have a role to play in this.
Okay, so first of all, I think it's basically centers around the rule of law. The rule of law is very, very important in the fight against corruption. And in terms of the human elements, the kind of people, the caliber of people who you put in sensitive positions also matter. So you need to do a lot of background checks and quite a lot of trainings. And I'll give you an example where the leadership of EFCC under Magu has failed and why I am emphasizing on training. Now, EFCC is an agency that I followed for a very long time. And what Magu has done with EFCC is to just expand the EFCC, the capacity of EFCC, so spreading offices everywhere. Since he came into office, he employed over 2,000 people. Now, these 2,000 people that he employed, what kind of training did he give them? It was a military training. You don't need military training for intelligence gathering. You don't need military training for investigation. You don't need military training for prosecution, right? What you need is intelligence, data analysis, psychoanalysis, and a lot of things. How do you gather information? How do you suspect? What do you consider reasonable suspicion of crime and all that? Now, you have all this staff at the EFCC, and they come back from this military training for 9 months, thinking, oh, EFCC is all about raiding, bragado, arrest, dump, do this, shoot, and all that. And then they come back to the commission and they realize that they don't even have guns, right? They come back with this superiority of, we want to work, and then they come and they just realize that they are just deflated and it's just a civil thing to do. So it boils down to the training of the people who you have recruited. And now these guys, majority of them are confused, in the system, because this is not what they expected, from the point of entry to the, and they now kind of disorganize and disorient most of these people when they get to the to office or get to work. So it comes down to the aspect of training and also the respect for rule of law. Rule of law is very important, just like my colleague has said. He said something that Magu should be granted bail, and I totally support that. Now, the Tribunal Inquiry Act that sets up this panel, being headed by Justice Salami, is not a court of law, it's a panel. And so Magu has been arrested. In my own books, Magu has been abducted and is being housed in for CID because no court has given the right for them to hold him as we speak. So his rights must be protected, even if he is found culpable, because the law in itself says so. So that's number one. Number two, he's been crying that he doesn't even know the charges or the petition against him. That violates the constitutional rights of fair hearing. How does he defend himself in court, or how does he even defend himself against the people who are trying to bring him down or during the investigation? So these are the things that we need to also begin to question. So Magu is good that he's tasting from the bitter pill. He's been serving others, because at the end of the day, you need to understand that wherever you are today, you can be on the other end tomorrow. I go to court and I see mighty people who were on the other side making laws and making rules and dishing out orders in the dock. And so the bed you lay, right, you may be the one that will lie on it at the end of the day. So we have to do things. And when you tell these people, you have to do things according to the law, it looks like you're challenging them to do what is absurd. But because if you follow the law and you follow due process, tomorrow you might be on the other side. And those things that you've put in place are the ones that will speak for you, and you will also be guided by those same principles. So rule of law is very important in the fight against corruption. Also, training for the people who are going to do this, and the quality, the character of these people. People, who are these people that we are bringing? What kind of histories do they have? What kind of background check have we carried out on them to be sure that we can trust them enough? Imagine NFIU. NFIU is one of the most critical database we have in Nigeria. Now, you tell me because there is an investigation going on about one particular person, you go and destroy such an evidence that is enough to bring down a country. It is totally absurd.
Martin, let me remain with you as we reel this conversation home in the next 10 minutes. What do we, the citizens, what do we, the people, need to do now? Because we're talking about the failure of government. We're talking about people that we have elected through our democratic right, through our power to vote, are in office and they are flouting the rule of law. What do we, the citizens, need to do? What actions can we take for the millions of people who are watching? What's your advice to them?
So citizens have rights to protest. They have rights to speak their minds. They have rights to recall. They have rights for protest votes. So for example, PDP in 2015, people felt PDP wasn't fighting corruption. And in 2015, they decided to kick out PDP and bring in this party. So there is another election coming up. People can also do the same to kick out this party and bring in a party that they feel can fight corruption genuinely. Now, but the most important thing is what we are doing now, sensitization of citizens, because people need to have information. They need to have access to information. They need to be educated about their rights. They also need to be educated about what is going on in their own country so they can make an informed decision and have an informed opinion when they want to speak about certain issues. So it is very important that we maintain the conversation that we are having now. And this conversation needs to extend to as many people as possible so that we educate them. So when election comes up in maybe in certain states or at the federal level, people will be able to have an informed decision. And citizens need to understand the power that they have, the power to demand or to place demand on the system and leadership, because we are the ones who actually have the power to make things change for ourselves. If we do not demand, the people in power will continue to ride on our rights and take them for granted.
Liborous, can you answer the same question?
Yeah. First and foremost, I would start from the NFIU hacking or breaking of computers. There's iCloud.
Exactly.
and so, if you like, go break the computer. I will only be surprised if they come tomorrow to tell us that because the computers are broken and so we cannot access information. Even when those informations are deleted from the computers, you can still retrieve those information. And then on what can the citizen do? I also want to allude to the fact, I want government to note this. If we all decide to disobey court orders and laws the way they do, anarchy will be the order of the day.
True.
No serious-minded foreign investor will come to your country to invest where laws are observed in breach. Because the first thing they will look at is if I have a dispute with a fellow businessman. And that's why you find out that most of the awards that they obtain against us are abroad, because they know that your laws here, you never obey them. And that's one very key point. And then what can we do? People sometimes ask me, Liborous, you're always on air talking. I said, because it's a bigger classroom for me to sensitize people, to allow people to understand that, look, we are the ones in opposition and not those in government. Magu can fight Balemi today. Malemi can fight Magu. Oshoma can fight Mbasekei. Tomorrow, the next thing you see them shake hands and they've settled. But who will be the one that will bear the brunt? Who are the ones that will suffer? So if Efcc and the government decide to violate court orders or disobey, and we fold our hands and we're arguing between Magu and Efcc and Malemi, we are the ones that will bear the brunt. So what do? We need to call on our National Assembly, our elected leaders, consistently look at the laws, make recommendations on how these laws can be strengthened. Also, when people violate the law, we should unanimously call them out. And another thing is protest. My colleague talked about it. The way we go to churches and mosques here, imagine Lagosians, for example, all trooping out on a Friday, say, we will just sit down on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the way we go to Redeem Camp, and won't do anything until this issue of corruption is resolved. I tell you, the government will send jitters down the spine of government, but we won't. It is well. We'll all keep quiet and say it is well. And when we maintain that it is well, we'll consistently remain the poverty capital of the world, where laws are not obeyed.
That's a good one. That's a good place to
That's
leave
a
it.
good place to leave it. Gentlemen, this was brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.